past month, Columbus Signature Academy Central students have been working on a project. We have been using scientific, mathematical, and geological data to find out if the Bigfoot phenomena is fact or fiction.
Bigfoot, fact or fiction? A lot of people think that Bigfoot is fake, but as believers, we know it's real.
Okay, so Bigfoot, he's real and not real. People say he's real, people also say he's not real. And all the evidence that to prove that he's fake is also evidence that was supposed to be that he was real.
The BFRO is an entire website dedicated to finding more about Bigfoot. BFRO stands for Bigfoot Fields Researchers Organization, and people can enter their own Bigfoot encounters. The website includes things like footprints, explanations, or proving big footprints fake, or fake encounters, I guess. Some people could say that people could just enter any story in and it'd be alright. They just put it on the internet and most of them are fake. That's actually not true. The BFRO goes through every single entry they get, and if it is adequate to be put onto their website, or if it's fake or not.
People say he looks like a bear, and people say he looks like an ape. He looks more like an ape since a bear has a big old snout on the end of his nose. But then the FBI found the hair, well, someone found hair and they reported it to the FBI, and the FBI tested the DNA on it. And it came back as negative, like it didn't go to any other animal. So that means like it could be part of Bigfoot, and because they never tested any. But then people say it could have been just part of a wig.
Human evolution. Bigfoot has very similar qualities to the human species. He also has very similar qualities to apes, such as being able to stand on his hind legs, having thick fur that he can use throughout the winter to keep warm. He also tends to have more animalistic habits. I believe that he had to adapt to his surroundings and that he could have been part of the human evolution. I believe this because early Neanderthals do kind of look similar to Bigfoot, and he couldn't have gone extinct, and he must have been able to adapt to his new habitats. The Bigfoot sightings due to Bigfoot are 3-1, so there aren't that many. Native Americans tribes spoke of Bigfoot but didn't actually describe his name. They didn't have a specific name for him, but the descriptions that they gave were very similar to the Sasquatch we know today. They believed in him as an omen to make humans change their way, or they also believed him to be a brother, like kin. They also thought that he could be in the physic and spiritual world, breaking both the boundaries. He's also been told to be the father of spirits. Bigfoot has been dated back to the Aztecs, which was at 1300 and 1521.
Bigfoot hibernates. We as believers believe that Bigfoot hibernates because in a picture on our slide, there's a graph that shows all of the different months of the year. And the only months that Bigfoot isn't normally seen, it's in the months of winter. Bigfoot is a big mammal. Most big mammals, like bears, hibernate. And it's also proven that Bigfoot might be related to bears through DNA tests. Non-believers would argue that a lot of people say Bigfoot is closely related to humans. So they can't hibernate because humans don't. But in DNA tests, like I said earlier, Bigfoot have been heard to be partially related to bears. So that's why I think that Bigfoot, or big feet, however you want to pronounce it for plural, hibernate.
People, including the government, have overlooked Bigfoot. According to CNN, there was a rare blue bee that had been lost for 4 years since 2016. And it turns out it had camouflaged itself to look like a normal honeybee by covering itself with pollen. It was found in May in Florida, and people had thought it to be extinct. The point is that people could be overlooking Bigfoot as he is simply camouflaging himself like the blue bee to stay out of sight from the human eye.
So Bigfoot is often reported near lakes, rivers, or any bodies of water in forests. As you can see from my diagram, completely accurate. He is an apex predator. You see the pyramid, look at it. it was made with a lot of energy. Therefore, it is an energy pyramid, and Bigfoot's at the top. Now, Bigfoot is an omnivore, much like a bear. So that's why mostly what he's compared a lot to a bear. He lives in the same general area as a black bear in California. So he's often compared and said he is a bear, but he's not. He's a Bigfoot. Very big difference. Now, some people could say that lakes freeze over. He doesn't really, he can't be real because bodies of water, they freeze over or get too cold to be useful. Running water does not freeze over. It just gets cold during winter. Lakes might freeze over, but there's creeks and things like that in forests. So you can't say that all bodies of water freeze over.
Bigfoot does not act like a human. In the famous Patterson video, Bigfoot, they say, is a person, but he's really not. He walks different and looks different, and the costumes that were made around the same time looked a lot different than the one that was there. And if someone was to act like Bigfoot, how could they walk in a creek with stilts and walk normal? And the sides of Bigfoot, his fur has been rubbed to where it looks used, and why would someone use a Bigfoot costume that much?
There is just way too much evidence to deny Bigfoot's existence. There are so many witnesses who say he is real, from hearing him to seeing him. Just go to the BFRO website and read the reports. On that same note, there is a whole organization dedicated to finding out if Bigfoot exists or not. Non-believers say that he doesn't exist because there are no real body samples or specimens of Bigfoot. However, there are over 5,400 reports of Bigfoot and more coming in daily. We even have so many photos like the Patterson-Gimlin video, which has been proven to be real by video experts and artists, saying that the creature in the video has muscle tension and even walks like it's real. We even know its lineage, probably coming from an old primate called Gigantopithecus cannabis, which apparently went extinct 100,000 years ago because of the Ice Age. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe it evolved through natural selection, adapting to its colder climate, and kept evolving through the years. And then Bigfoot being a subspecies of Gigantopithecus. Concluding this presentation, Bigfoot is real. The evidence we presented, from how he acts to the witnesses who have seen him and to his lineage, this evidence would be enough to convince anyone, but somehow there's only a few who actually believe. People have dedicated their lives to finding out if Bigfoot exists or not. Hopefully we have persuaded you that Bigfoot exists and is out there in the world somewhere.
Thank you. Now it's time for the non-believers like the Bigfoot Project.
All clues to Bigfoot are natural habitat occurrences. Some witnesses report hearing some sort of howling or shrieking sound, which could easily be owls or coyotes in the early morning or late at night when Bigfoot is usually spotted. Some people even report hearing a knocking sound. As a person who lives in the country surrounded by trees, there's a plethora of noises you'll hear, and I can assure you that this knocking sensation are just woodpeckers looking for food. Anyways, have you ever heard of a Bigfoot nest? Well, coincidentally, they look exactly like a black bear's den. Isn't that funny? As you can see, all of these clues are just naturally occurring events in the woods.
Some people believe that Bigfoot is really the prehistoric ape Gigantopithecus. This, however, is not possible for many reasons. One of which is that the Gigantopithecus lived in the tropical forests of China, while Bigfoot has been spotted worldwide. Another reason that these two species cannot be the same is because the Gigantopithecus was a herbivore and ate bamboo, while the Bigfoot is portrayed as a carnivore in most stories. And finally, the last reason that these species cannot be the same is because Gigantopithecus has been confirmed to have gone extinct thousands of years ago.
So the Gigantopithecus is what we're suggesting could have been a Bigfoot. And if it was a Bigfoot, it would have migrated from China. But something of its size wouldn't have had an easy job migrating from China, due to the fact that it was actually incredibly obese at the time. They weren't really keen on moving a ton, and so it was very unlikely that something of its type would move away from its primary food source, and being of its size, it wouldn't have its primary food source, so there's a high chance that it would have starved.
Many people doubted their quote-unquote Bigfoot encounters. Davy Crockett doubted his encounter because of food poisoning. Lewis and Clark almost know their encounter was fake because it was the Tupadica tribes. You would think with the California gold rush there would be many people that would have seen a quote-unquote Bigfoot, but no, there was no reported sightings that are facts or actual evidence. And Bigfoot was a really large part of Native American culture. Although there is no evidence, it was still important to people, but we can't go off of it if there's no evidence.
Bigfoot has been compared to a bear or a large male ape. Even in the Patterson video, he compared Bigfoot to an ape by the bridge over its eyes and the way its mouth was shaped. DNA has not proven Bigfoot to be real. If scientists had DNA evidence to prove that Bigfoot was real, we would know what he eats, where its natural habitat is, and its carrying capacity. In a couple articles that I've read, they've said that they had bone, hairs, or even teeth to do research on to get DNA from, but they never told us the results from what the bone, hair, or teeth got. Since we have no DNA evidence, we cannot find out its limiting factor because we don't know the carrying capacity of Bigfoot. Bigfoot can also be a type of species of bear.
For Bigfoot's size, he would need 10,000 calories daily to sustain his body. That means he would have to eat 252 rabbits or 11 deer each day, causing the wildlife to suffer. We also don't know if they live in packs or on their own, but over time, species would greatly decrease and it would be very noticeable.
Bigfoot has been sighted all over the world, in Arizona and Alaska, for example. Now let's take a look at a koala, which is natural habitat is in Australia. If we took that koala and put it in Alaska, how long do you think it would last? Not very long. If we look at a Bigfoot and say it was real and it had adapted to all these different climates, wouldn't the population density be more than it already is? Probably. So that means Bigfoot cannot possibly be real.
How can Bigfoot live in different climates? There are BFRO sightings in different climates, like, for example, Alaska and Florida. They're extremely different climates. And let's just look at Alaska. If Bigfoot tried to hibernate in Alaska, his brown fur would stick out of the white snow. And more than likely, someone would come over and check out what is sticking out of the white snow, and they'd see Bigfoot. But if Bigfoot was there, they'd probably paralyze him and get him. In Indiana, back in the day, we clear-cutted forests. If we found Bigfoot or something relatively close to Bigfoot, you'd expect them to jot it down very deeply into a notebook or journal. Overall, those are just extremely different climates. They could be dry, humid, or cold and wet, but how could he go back and forth through different climates if he has a distinct habitat?
Bigfoot and bears are both apex predators on our food web. Science says two apex predators cannot coexist in the same area because of competition, so one of them would either have to move or die out. Seeing as there are so many bears in our area, we can only assume that Bigfoot either doesn't exist or has died out.
Eric Earl Shippen's photo of Bigfoot's tracks is clearly that of a bear's. He could have even made it himself with the snow. I know from experience that it's very easy to do. For example, every year my family and I go to Colorado for Christmas, and every year we play what's called the Bigfoot game, where one person is it and they have to hide. The rest of us have to find him or her using the tracks that they leave behind. And these tracks could be made of any animal to make it harder for us to find them and distinguish between a real animal's tracks and the fake one that he left behind. So from this experience, I know that it's incredibly easy to make footprints. The footprint would have had to be made by Eric Earl himself because the print was very fresh and had no snow or ice layers on top. For example, this looks like a real Bigfoot print, right? Well, guess what? I made it in my kitchen a couple nights ago with flour and glitter. So from this, you would know that it's very easy for Eric to have made it using just snow. In fact, using flour and glitter is probably harder than using snow, like Eric would have had access to. The footprint was so fresh that he would have had to have seen Bigfoot himself.
but he never mentioned anything of the sort. It also was snowing hard on Mount Everest that day, so it should have had at least a little bit of snow or ice filling the top. So he obviously worked very fast creating the print and then took a photo of it.
Many people will say they didn't see Bigfoot because miners may have been busy, or people going west were just so focused on getting to where they were going. But for a 9-foot creature, you'd think someone would have saw something. And if anyone would have said otherwise, it's just not real, because you'd say something about a 9-foot creature just standing there.
In conclusion, Bigfoot cannot possibly be real. We've presented you with all of this evidence, and now it's time for you to make an opinion. Do you believe Bigfoot is real? We certainly do not. Thank you for listening. Thank you. Now that you've heard both sides of the Bigfoot phenomena, it is time for you to decide whether it is fact or fiction. The choice is always yours.